So it's come to my understanding that we all have a problem. Most of the world poorly navigates it. Failure, or the idea of failing, can shake us to the core depending on how we're tied to the outcome. For those that don't know, I made a video about gaming and its transferable skills. One of the things I spoke on was the paradox of failure. In essence, the paradox of failure is the idea that although you may fail, you will fail continuously, making incremental success towards a more beneficial outcome with each repetitious failure. The reason why that was so important is because we forego the idea of shame and guilt in order to achieve a better version of failure until success has been reached. It's called a paradox because this isn't how the regular world navigates it. The regular world navigates it with a bunch of societal perspectives of failure that aren't all that savory. One variation of societal perspective is that it's critical and tyrannical. This is typically oriented towards self because we are either not being fair to who we are, or we make it this absolute thing that we can never get past. From the outside looking in, it can lead to labeling, making us feel that we are what was the outcome of a disappointment or of a failure, and that can develop further maladaptively into a limiter, making us permanently stay there, permanently afraid, never wanting to address what we failed. And lastly, there's a lot of shame and guilt, whether internal or external, in regards to what we don't overcome. If we have a lot of expectation or entitlement of self, well, typically that's not going to feel too good when we don't reach what we expected. And that often leads to a sense of shame or guilt in reference to ourselves. It might even impact what we do in the future. Failure defined, it can be considered a lack of success, not reaching a projected or expected outcome. And in regards to emotions or figurative sentiments of failure, it can mean arriving at something that feels incomplete or unfinished in cognitive thought process or emotional loops. However, positive incremental failure moves us closer to success or even temporary fulfillment, which begs to think the initial definition just might be flawed. To be clear, it's not so much about the what, because the what is subjective and is constantly shifting as a measure, from academic tests to relationships, even goal setting. But the how of how we deal or navigate it, and the why, in a sense of why we choose that over other processes, that is something that remains consistent and something we will take a closer look at. For those that are unfamiliar, there are some monsters in the realm of failure or in the outcome that failure can bring. One of the things that we can stumble upon is the hesitative permanence. Basically, what this implies is that the previous experiences that we've undergone through life induces fear. It's better to not try at all if there is even a slight chance of failing. So, we sacrifice our potential for the sake of staying safe in a bubble that takes us nowhere. Because nowhere is safer than somewhere, and at least it can't get any worse. Which is often a lie we tell ourselves. We desensitize the suffocation of letting go of what could have been, and that is an attack on our future selves, whether we want to achieve that perspective or not. Another outcome is the idea of shamelessness, and this can obviously be multiplicative. It can get worse and worse and become even acts of arrogance, in which case we ignorantly surpass hesitance, but find ourselves not taking any responsibility for our failures and have externalizing blaming factors, saying that it's the world's fault, it's your fault, it's not my fault. If this was better, I would have done better, instead of realizing that, no, we failed, and we're not choosing to look at it in the way we should. Additionally, we may attempt to escape the unfavorable outcome and the negativity we don't want to address through an act of minimizing the event or moment that required the performance or investment because of how we did and how that didn't meet our expectations. We may say, well, it doesn't matter anyway. This isn't a big deal. It's just X, so who cares? But the truth is, we did care. And we did try. We made an honest attempt, but just because our entitlement impeded our ability to be proud of the benefits of the outcome, we lose the ability to understand that we can't control everything, leading to maladaptive coping mechanisms, creating an autonomic system that cripples our growth. Lastly, there's also a matter of poor goal orientation. There are two ideas of goal orientation. You have performance-oriented and learning-oriented. Learning-oriented means that if we enact a goal, not only is it part of the goal to see how far we can go, but it's also part of the goal to understand that we may not reach it immediately, but we can get as much as we can in the process. It's like the incremental success of a less than perfect plan. Performance orientation is every act of a goal is in itself a judgment of who we are or what we're capable of. This by itself is not a problem. But when we make every single act in this image or in this perspective, that's what makes it a problem. We allow the outcome of our performance to become too tyrannical of a judgment towards ourselves, where if we fail, we label and destroy ourselves simply because of entitlement. And if we succeed, we act as if it was already anticipated and we're entitled to that success. That's a bit of a double-edged sword, because if we don't achieve things, we think even lesser of ourselves. If we do, we don't even grant ourselves the blessing of what we just accomplished, no matter if it's incremental or not. And that can be a heavy looming factor on everybody, regardless of what you're trying to achieve. And I think it's about time we try to look at things a little differently. Failure is a bit of a sleeping monster, and it's something that I've addressed throughout my lifetime as well, from personal concepts and objectives to even obstacles, and even seeing that in those around me. And it's in that learning component and in seeing how much failure has impacted others, I've come up with some new perspectives, different avenues for people to try and adjust. One of the things that I've come across is understanding the fine line. We need to be honest with ourselves. The thing is that we might lie to ourselves and state how impossible something is, or how sure we paint out the outcome without trying to justify why we should just walk away. That's not fair, and that's not justified. That is a mechanism we've created in our own brains to allow to flow forward through life with no control, because we've abandoned the idea that we have the power to control anything, then get triggered in the same sense because we defend such an inferiority and insecurity that isn't so publicly known to the world. Well, that's in lieu of being honest with ourselves. Because the next idea is the process concept. In its entirety, it's the idea that life is not a sprint. Slow the hell down. Everything is not as definitive as you think. And although some performances or actions may lead to a sense of disappointment because of how entitled we may still be towards success, it doesn't change that our failure taught more than what the success could ever teach us. Value that. I have failed countless times. I will fail countless more, and I personally look forward to what that brings, disappointment and all. Lastly, enjoy the journey. Life will already bear incredible amounts of stress. You will already get hit by the cruelty that the world can offer. Although being critical of yourself is extremely useful, do not be so sophisticatedly tyrannical with yourself. You're going to fail. You might slip. You might make a bad decision. You're not perfect. You're just learning. You only truly fail if you take nothing from it. So take something, anything, and turn that into energy to readdress the dimension of progress that you failed to reach initially. I say all that to say this. Failure is inevitable. Either we learn by failing or we fail our future selves through avoidance mechanisms that can take many forms. All it takes is a flick of the brain to either start being more involved in our own processes if we want to value us for a change, or we continue to cover up those possibilities we let fly by us with whatever deceptive method we've thought has worked in our favor for years. The last thing to understand is how we use or supplement these avenues or different methods. It's going to be subjective and unique to us. We need to think about how someone like us, with our specific strengths and weaknesses, is going to use this moving forward. And that's very important, because you have some people that are a little more deceptive, some that are a little more prideful, some that are a little more selfish. Well, how's a prideful person going to address failure? And how's a prideful person going to learn new perspectives to address failure? How is a shameful person going to do? How is a deceptive person going to do? How's a selfish person going to do? You need to understand that this isn't where the comparison to others comes into play. We need to realize that how we do this, that's subjective. But I think adopting the perspectives and integrating those perspectives into who we are can allow us a sense of balance to be found in what we currently are. I understand that we all have our own monsters. We do. We all have our own evils to address. That's never going to go away. All that changes when we become better people is that the better version of ourselves becomes more prominent and louder than the evil that we live with. We all got some, but we all also got some potential. We all got some power too. Let's use that. I think it's about time that we did. So with that being said, thank you for all watching the video. If you liked the video, like it. If you enjoyed the content so far, consider subscribing. If you disliked the video, then dislike it. Hopefully you'll never see me again. Comment in the comment section down below for your perspectives on failure. Maybe some stories of your own. I found that this is something that we've all had a problem with, and this is something that we're all addressing because it is forever, like I said, inevitable. So let's all learn something for a change. Thanks again, and I'll go ahead and see you next time.